Welcome back to People Analytics. I'm your host, Lindsay Patton, and I'm excited to have Peter Chhum of Nickelodeon Animation Studios here with me today. Peter, I'll give you a moment to introduce yourself and what you do at Nickelodeon.
Thanks, Lindsay. Yeah, so here at Nickelodeon, I'm the manager of social strategy. And that essentially means anything you see in your feeds, if you follow any of the Nickelodeon accounts, I've had something to do with it. I've either brainstormed the content, had a hand in making it, or just watched the show for ideas and watched a bunch of our content to make sure it translates from screen to your feeds.
So one thing about Peter, and the reason why I'm so excited to have him on, is we worked together many years ago when Peter was an intern focusing on journalism. So I remember when I was working with Peter, we bonded over SpongeBob. And it just gives me so much joy to see you be able to work with SpongeBob every day. So can you go on about what that's like?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, we worked together, which were such formative years for me. So I'm so happy that we're getting a chance to sit down and chat in another professional setting years later. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about SpongeBob. And it gets no better than that. And the cool part about it is I have to. Right. One of the main accounts that I run is the SpongeBob Instagram and SpongeBob Twitter. And so naturally, every day, with such a big following and with the property that means so much to so many people, you want to check those boxes of, are we communicating what the show communicated to me? Am I representing it the way it was shown to me? And is the best versions of it in people's feeds? And then, working at Nickelodeon, there's that trickle-down effect of, that show is the creme de la creme of what is formative for so many people. Mm-hmm. And so that just trickles down into how we operate as a culture and operate as a business. Because, if it's funny, if it's irreverent, does it feel like Nickelodeon? And we can always trace it back to, is this something SpongeBob would say? Is there a SpongeBob quote for this scenario? And if it isn't, then we're totally out of line and we're not remembering where we work.
And that's why I'm so excited to have you on the podcast as well, is because you think about culture so much. And so how does culture relate to what you do, and how is it the core of what you do?
Yeah, I mean, you never want to feel like you're working for someone, right? Like when I worked with you, I didn't feel like I worked for Lindsay. I felt like I was an aspiring journalist working for the outlet we were working at. And I think in some of my years in previous jobs, I did feel like I was working for my boss. Mm-hmm. And one thing that we try to establish at Nick and I try to establish with my team is no one works for me and you're not here to impress me. We're all working for a bigger goal. And that's why we keep that North Star in mind, which is, I like to brand it as fast, loose, and disciplined, mm-hmm. right? Being that we work in social media, the environment of it is naturally going to be really fast. Trends pop up, memes pop up, things we just have to be adjustable to. The pace is something we can't really control. So you have to work fast. And then I say loose because being that we work at Nickelodeon, there's no point in taking ourselves seriously. Because as soon as we do, now we're losing sight of why we wanted to work here and what we loved about the company itself. Right. So we want to be loose and fast. And then disciplined just comes with the trait of social media, right? It's a read and react business. It's this performed really well. Let's do it again. This didn't perform well. Let's make some adjustments to it. Right. So we can mix those 3 points. Now, as a team, as a manager, as an editor, as a designer, you have your North Star and you have your compass that kind of tells you how you want to operate and what makes us so successful. And so between that, if we can obey those 3 things, now we don't feel like we're working for someone. We feel like we're just continuing what we love about our jobs.
Mm-hmm. So is there ever an intimidation factor? Nickelodeon is such a big name and, SpongeBob has such an impact on our culture. So how do you balance the intimidation, the pressure of upholding that, but also, you said Nickelodeon's a very fun place. So, how does that blend together?
Yeah, you know what? It's a really good question because a lot of our colleagues, I work in social media and there are a bunch of different departments, but the big crux of the company are the artists who make the shows, mm-hmm. right? SpongeBob is still in production. We have a lot of new Nicktoons in production. Then we have our legacy IPs from the 90s and early 2000s, which we all love. And so naturally, there's that bit of imposter syndrome that creeps in because for an artist to be working on a show at Nickelodeon, they have to be there's a certain level of expectation that they are working under, right? So naturally, there's that little bit of, if they're in arts and Nickelodeon, does that mean I'm not the same level in social media? Am I in the same level of HR, right? And so I think the thing that we can find solace in as a culture, as we work together, is just, we're all the experts of our platforms and we all are here for a reason. And the best way to affirm each other in that is just, are we true to the morals of being funny, being irreverent, being light? And then again, just if things don't perform well, then we just fix it, right? We need to we allow ourselves the leverage to lean into trying things and then fixing things. And that, I think, is a key of working in social. It's like some things just won't perform, some things will. And when they don't, you just fix it. And you don't, like I like to say all the time, we don't pinpoint who started the fire. We just put the fire out.
I like that.
Because we're all on the same ship. We're all looking out for each other. And as soon as the egos get in the way, now all of a sudden it's like we're working for each other and not with each other. And you don't ever want that to happen, right?
Right. And so how has that changed, focusing on the fire itself? How's that changed for collaboration?
Yeah, I think it's so important. And, I came up the ranks as, I started as a video editor, then I transitioned to being a bit of a designer, and now I'm like in the managerial position. So going through those ranks, I just remembered how much I loved having the agency and clarity to own my projects, right? It was like, we want Peter in this room because he offers a perspective on this idea, or I like what Peter did with this. And now it's doing that same thing to our designers, to our video editors, to our copywriters. It's giving people that agency and that onus. So, you never want to strip that away from someone, because that individuality is what makes the shows, and it's very important that what is seen on TV trickles down to us as employees. And we have that guidance to know what our boundaries are and then to be creative on top of that. So, if there is a fire of a misspelled tweet, right? Or quoting a SpongeBob episode wrong and the fans just got on us because
don't do that to the fans.
That we had one tweet where it was like, we've never seen SpongeBob's backyard, and then someone replied to us with an image from an episode of SpongeBob's backyard, and we were like, well, let's just take that down. And that's an honest mistake. And I think you have to lead with the acceptance and merit first, right? It's like, you don't doubt first, you just let someone own what their project is. I didn't if we get called out for something, which is inevitable to happen as a brand, we just have to identify what our interest was at mind, and then we'll just go from there. You never want to discipline someone for their ideas. We can discipline each other for results and how to do things differently, but you never want to discourage ideas, because all of a sudden, I'd like to think by scolding someone for a mistake, you're not telling them to not do it again. You're teaching them to just not be vocal about their mistakes moving forward. And now you got an environment where it's like, I do not want to talk to this person right now. Last time I did it, this happened, right? And it's going to happen in any workplace, but we're all doing our best.
Yeah. I mean, a culture of fear is not one that moves things forward. So I really love that viewpoint. So I want to also talk about, you're in a unique situation. You mentioned, the fans are analyzing the content you're putting out there. Yeah. So you have to be fans yourselves. So how does understanding the origin content really play into the culture overall?
It's funny. It's part of any job description, right? You know what your expectations are, it's communicated what your expectations are, and what the ideal outcome is of you in a job. And at Nickelodeon, being that we're a kids network and we make cartoons, part of our job description is to know what we're making. So that essentially boils down to watching these episodes before they hit the TV screens. And sometimes that means I'm blocking off an hour on my calendar because I need to watch these new 3 episodes, right? And sometimes the episode starts and you're kind of like, oh man, I have so many episodes to run through. And it's important to remind yourself, okay, time out. This is not a stress and this is not a burden, right? You blocked off an hour to watch 3 new episodes of this new show. And then the best part is knowing you're friends with the people who made this, right? The people who made the show are right down the hallway. They're on the second floor. They're on the third floor. And I think it really comes down to respect for each other, right? If I didn't know, since I know the people who make the shows, I'm more invested in because I want to see how Lindsay put her effort into this joke. You know, it's like, oh, I know that joke came from Lindsay, right? And so even though it's such a big company and it's such a big brand, it really comes down to the people and respect you have for each other's skill sets, because that's what I'm watching for in the shows now, right? When I see the SpongeBob jokes now, I'm like, I know who wrote that one. That's totally that person's humor, right?
That's really cool.
It's the respect we have for each other that really lends itself further. Or, you know, when we hit our brainstorms for our monthly briefs of like, okay, what are we posting on Nickelodeon this month? What are some things that did well last month? What are some things that we can look forward to? What are some shows we need to highlight more? And that's where the importance comes down to watching our content and knowing what the content pillars are. You know, it's like, it could be for SpongeBob, it could be, let's lean into his quotes, let's lean into his spirit, let's lean into like the humor. And then for another show, it's let's lean into the action, let's lean into this, lean into that. And that ownership is assigned to all of us to, you know, make sure we're experts in our arena, because, you know, we want to do justice for the people who are making them. You know, and it's a constant respect between all of us, which I think is the most important part. It's not just watching a thing and reviewing it. It's watching the work of a peer and a friend and admiring it. And now you want to put on the best effort you can for them on their behalf.
I want you to expand on that and talk about how admiring your peers' work can really change an environment.
You know, I think we can easily get caught up in the like a crabs in a barrel mentality, you know, where it kind of feels like this person's success means I'm not succeeding. Or this person just got a promotion and I've still been in the same job. And now it's like a 1-for-1 type system, right? But I think it's important to understand, and this is what I learned as a professional and trickles down to what I do here at Nick, is just, you know, we can all succeed at the same time. It might not all look the same, but we can all succeed at the same time by looking out for each other and respecting each other's work and giving each other the agency and the onus to own our projects. I think a lot of times what we want at such a big company is visibility. Sometimes you can get lost, like, I'll never be noticed in this room. You know, I don't know what this big meeting means for me. And it's important to always just kind of be like, Lindsay, you haven't spoken up yet. Is there anything you wanted to add? You know, and it's just being very pointed with your direct team members to let them know that you're there to hear them and that you're there to nurture them and mentor them into who they want to be. And for that reason, you know, if you're leading with people first, because again, you don't ever want to feel like you're working for someone, and I don't want anyone to feel like they're working for me. And so that's where the respect comes into play. We're bringing each other along at the same time, and we're all here with the same interests. So there's no point in trying to outweigh or race each other to a meeting or race each other to a talking point. It's, you know, we all have the same interest in mind, which is trying to have fun as much as we can during our workday. And that is our goal, is to have as much fun as we can to complement the fun that's been on TV. And I think that is what really sets the standard. Is money is being made, yes, and there are like ratings that we are cognizant of, but when that's out of our control, what's in our control is how we treat each other.
And do you think that, you know, that culture in the workplace is because Nickelodeon, I mean, it has an established culture for, you know, years, and it's really upheld that. It's, you know, it's such a crux of so many people's lives. So do you feel that, you know, having the brand Nickelodeon establishing, you know, who it was early on really has contributed to that?
Yeah, I think so. It's so advantageous for us because we all, you know, when you hear the name and you see the logo and you see the characters, it all hits you and it all intrinsically means something to all of us, right? And for all of us who, you know, no one's making anyone work here, right? It's not like ideally the people who we work with aren't like, the only one who hired me was Nickelodeon, right? It's like ideally we work at a place that we all choose to be at. And that is a huge difference for us. It's that we all want to be here and we choose to be here. And, you know, I think it's important that we always remind ourselves, and we do it in our monthly meetings. We do it as we put together content. It's, you know, why did this resonate with you? You know, and like, if you can answer that question, connecting why a piece resonated with you, why an idea resonated with you, and connecting it to, what the brand means to you as a kid and what it means to you now and what you want to establish for kids growing up now, then we've got a really, what we have now is just intention. Mm-hmm. And that is so important for all of us, right? It's like not just going through the workday, trying to get through it and try to get to bed, but it's to have the intention of wanting to do your best and wanting to, provide a piece of content or just work in a way that we're all really proud of.
Mm-hmm. And because it's such a big organization, how do you collaborate? Because I know that you also work with people on the East Coast as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's, I think that's one of the biggest challenges is, figuring out who to go to for what and just what visibility looks like for you and if that's something you're looking for. But I think it's, in the everydayness, I think it's important to find your pillars, right? Your people mm-hmm. who you can just go to for the quick ideas, for venting, for talking about what shows you're watching. Equally as important to the work is the chemistry you build with your team members. Mm-hmm. And with such big teams, I think, it's important to, especially, in this environment where some of us work from home, some of us are on a different coast, some of us are in a different office. I think it's just important. It's important to just be, friends with your colleagues and just make sure there's that chemistry that isn't just work focused. It's a show you're watching. It's a restaurant you went to. It's a vacation you're taking up next. And I think that's important to a lot in your workday, right? Like that 10 minutes in the kitchen where you and I are meeting and we just happen to run into each other, mm-hmm. right? It's that 10 minutes before the day gets started of, I just had this crazy dream. It's like that stuff that builds the culture. It's those little things that make it established that we're not just here working from 9 to 6. It's that we're here collaborating and hanging out and meeting each other, getting to know each other as people that will make the best products.
Mm-hmm. So we talked a lot about SpongeBob because we have that in common. But what other shows and things do you work on that you want to share?
Yeah, it's so we have a new Nicktoon called The Middlemost Post, which I really love. It's a very cool concept about a reformed rain cloud who now only wants to make people's days brighter.
Oh.
That show is great. I also really enjoy the Patrick Star Show, which is a spinoff from SpongeBob. The antics of it are just next level funny. There's also Camp Coral, SpongeBob spinoff that's in CG, which is great. And then we have a few other things that are unannounced, but just 2021 and 2022 is a big animation slate for Nickelodeon. And I know live action has been our calling card for a long time. Like name live action shows from the 90s to now, Victorious, iCarly, like we have those big hits. But the animation pendulum is really swinging, and animation is like at my core. And our animation slate going into 2022 is just really big. And there are a lot of things that will be announced soon that are very exciting.
So how does that excitement affect the culture?
It's just like from the top down level of like, our best interest is in mind, and that it just shows like when you see really great leadership up top that has the best interest of the company, now as it trickles down, that excitement just comes down through it as well. If all we had was, 4 shows and nothing was ever getting greenlit, or if, you're not getting clear communication from leadership, now you're kind of treading water and you're wondering if what you're doing is good. Clearly there's a correlation between how well and how much we like our jobs and then all the new projects that are coming, and just knowing that the company's not stopping, right? Like there's more to be excited about. There's more shows for us to watch. There's more jokes being written. There's new people coming in to work on them. That just leads to the environment of like being at a fun place, and a place that you would be at even if you weren't being paid,
Yeah. And you said that comes from the top. So what qualities, in leadership at Nickelodeon, do you really admire?
I think what I've seen, Nickelodeon itself is a corporate brand, right? It's a big brand that we all are familiar with, but it doesn't feel that way working here, because you can easily walk into an exec's office or knock on their door and ask for a quick 10, 15 minutes to chat. There's an open door policy that a lot of companies say, it's like, we're not coworkers, we're family. And there's that attitude with it. But I can say working here for, going on 3 years now, not once have I ever felt subordinate to somebody or superior to anybody. Mm-hmm. And that's because we all have such a respect for each other. So when it comes to leadership up top, there is a level of transparency that's just available to us, whether that's in mentorship, whether that's just brainstorms, whether that's, information coming up about, new shows or information coming up about like where the company is headed. These are questions that are never out of pocket. And these are questions that can be asked. And, it's just a good environment to know, it's not like there's an embargo on information. There's a certain tier you need to be to hear it, right? Like that sets that expectation. Like, okay, now I got to get there, so I know this, or I got to be in those rooms. It's like it's an open door policy all around, and it starts with the leadership up top, and it trickles down to our PAs and like interns. It's just establishing like, if you're here, we want you to be here, and we're going to make sure you would like being here.
That's so awesome. Mm-hmm. And those are all the questions that I have for you. Is there anything else any wisdom that you would like to share before we wrap up the discussion?
One thing I've learned in my time here, which has been just invaluable in my development, is simply, there's a lot of freedom and there's a lot of leadership and mentorship that comes along with, becoming a professional and what you need. And I think it's just important to communicate what you need to be set up for success. Mm-hmm. And I think whether that's feedback, whether that's, having your hand held a little bit, whether that's being talked to so you understand the ground workings of everything and you're not just keeping up with how things are done. I think it's important as an employee, and it's something we communicate here at Nick. It's to always communicate what you need and what you're looking for and where you can be better, because you're choosing to come to work every day, right? Mm-hmm. We're not making you come to work every day. But since you're choosing to come to work as leadership, as a brand, we are also entitled to make sure we're developing you to be who you want to be. So I think just for any employee and for anyone, in a professional setting, we're making that cognizant choice every day. So we also have the freedom to make sure we're getting what we want out of every day.
That's awesome. And thank you so much for your time today. This was a great conversation and great insight on, how you create an environment that's fun, starting, with culture first. I really loved your insight.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So if people want to get in touch with you and ask you questions, how can they do that? What's the best avenue to reach you?
Yeah, I am pretty active on LinkedIn. First name Peter, P-E-T-R, last name Chhum, C-H-H-U-M. You can find me there. Or to be honest, I don't mind a DM on Instagram either. So
we are in a modern world.
Yeah. So same first and last name, Instagram handle, Peter Chhum. So.
Well, thank you again, Peter. Again, I am your host, Lindsay Patton. This is People Analytics from StaffGeek. And if you know anyone who is passionate about culture, HR, feel free to reach out to me. My email is lindsay@staffgeek.com, lindsay@staffgeek.com. Thank you for listening to StaffGeek's People Analytics podcast. I'm your host, Lindsay Patton, and I'm always looking to interview leaders who put people first. If you or someone you know lead with a people-first mindset, please email me at lindsay@staffgeek.com. That's LINDSAY@staffgeek.com. If you want to take things a step deeper and understand your organization's true culture DNA, I encourage you to take StaffGeek's free culture assessment. Just head to staffgeek.com and click the button that says Free Culture Assessment. Thanks again for listening.